The 90s gave us films that governments literally did not want you to see. Censored, banned, and butchered by studios terrified of their own creations. These cyberpunk movies predicted surveillance capitalism, AI superintelligence, and the total erasure of privacy decades before any of it happened. So, why did nobody listen? Here are 10 heavily censored 90s cyberpunk films that mapped out our tech nightmare before we even logged on. Number 10, Circuitry Man, 1990. You have never heard of this movie, and that is exactly why it belongs on this list. Circuitry Man imagines a future where the surface of the Earth is completely uninhabitable and all of humanity has been forced underground into sprawling subterranean cities. The air above is poison. Society has collapsed into a black market economy where the most valuable commodity is not gold or weapons, but computer chips that plug directly into your brain and deliver artificial emotions. Think about that for a second. In 1990, a low-budget science fiction film predicted that human beings would become so emotionally numb that they would pay money to feel something, anything, through a digital interface. If that does not sound exactly like the dopamine economy of social media and algorithm-driven content, I do not know what does. The film follows a female bodyguard tasked with transporting a case of these emotion chips across a dangerous wasteland, pursued by a deranged villain named Plughead, who can interface with any electronic system just by touching it. Several scenes involving Plughead's violent neural hacking were trimmed for theatrical release because censors found the imagery of someone forcibly entering another person's mind through technology deeply disturbing. Critics at the time dismissed it as a cheap knockoff of bigger cyberpunk films, but the underground cult following kept it alive on VHS trading circuits. Director Stephen Lovey built an entire world on a shoestring budget that feels more prophetic with each passing year. The idea that we would willingly buy artificial feelings delivered through a screen was considered absurd in 1990. Now, we call it an app store. Circuitry Man deserves a second look from anyone who thinks the 90s had nothing original to say about the digital future. Number 9. Nemesis, 1992. Albert Pune was the king of ambitious low-budget science fiction, and Nemesis might be his most audacious creation. Set in a future where the line between human and cyborg has become almost invisible, the film drops you into a world where law enforcement agents are routinely upgraded with mechanical parts until they can barely remember what it felt like to be fully organic. The protagonist is a burned-out cop named Alex, who discovers a conspiracy involving cyborgs systematically replacing world leaders to take control of the global information network. Several countries outright banned Nemesis or demanded significant cuts because the film's depiction of cybernetic body modification was considered excessively graphic and ideologically dangerous. The Japanese release was trimmed by nearly 8 minutes. What makes this film so eerily prescient is its central anxiety. It asks who gets to define what counts as human when technology can replicate every function of the body and mind. We are living through this exact debate right now with artificial intelligence, deepfakes, and synthetic media. Critics were divided, with some calling it a masterpiece of B-movie excess, and others dismissing the philosophical ambitions buried under all the gunfire. But Pune packed genuine ideas into every action sequence. There is a scene where Alex literally peels back his own skin to discover circuitry underneath, and the horror on his face is not about the metal. It is about the realization that he cannot tell where the machine ends and the man begins. That existential dread is no longer science fiction. It is a legitimate question being asked in boardrooms and ethics committees around the world today. Number 8. Freejack, 1992. Imagine a future where the ultra-wealthy have figured out how to cheat death, not through medicine or genetics, but by snatching healthy bodies from the past and transplanting their consciousness into them. That is the premise of Freejack, and in 1992, it was considered so outlandish that most audiences laughed it off. Starring Emilio Estevez, Mick Jagger, and Anthony Hopkins, this film had genuine star power behind a concept that was way ahead of its time. Estevez plays a race car driver who is pulled from the moment of his death into a future dystopia where corporations control everything and the rich literally harvest younger, healthier bodies to extend their lives. The censorship issues with Freejack were fascinating. Several sequences depicting the consciousness transfer process were cut or reworked because test audiences found the body snatching concept deeply unsettling on an almost spiritual level. The idea that your identity could be erased and overwritten like a hard drive struck a nerve that went beyond typical sci-fi violence. Critics savaged the film commercially, and it bombed at the box office, earning barely half of its $40 million budget. But here is the thing. Today we have billionaires spending obscene fortunes on life extension technology, young blood transfusions, and brain-computer interfaces designed to upload consciousness. Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Brian Johnson. The Freejack scenario is no longer a punchline. It is a business plan. The film also predicted a corporate-controlled surveillance state where every citizen is tracked through an omnipresent digital network. Anthony Hopkins plays the dying billionaire with a chilling calm that makes the whole premise feel less like fantasy and more like prophecy. Freejack deserved better than the dismissal it received. Number 7. Ghost in the Machine, 1993. A serial killer's consciousness gets uploaded into an electrical grid during a freak accident, and suddenly he can murder people through their own technology. That sounds like a ridiculous horror movie premise, and in 1993 most critics treated Ghost in the Machine exactly that way. But strip away the slasher elements, and you find a film that is terrifyingly accurate about the dangers of a fully connected world. The killer travels through power lines, telephone networks, and early computer systems, weaponizing the very infrastructure that society depends on. He manipulates ATMs, medical equipment, and household appliances. He turns convenience into a weapon. Several scenes were censored or cut entirely in multiple territories because the deaths were considered too disturbing, particularly sequences where characters are killed through mundane everyday technology like kitchen appliances and medical scanners. Censors were uncomfortable with the implication that the things we trust with our daily lives could be turned against us. The film barely made a dent at the box office and was forgotten almost immediately. But think about what it actually predicted. We now live in a world of smart homes, internet-connected medical devices, and infrastructure vulnerable to cyber attacks. Hospitals have been held hostage by ransomware. Power grids have been targeted by state actors. The entire concept of a malevolent intelligence traveling through interconnected systems is no longer fiction. It is a cybersecurity briefing. Ghost in the Machine understood something fundamental that most 90s audiences were not ready to hear. The more connected we become, the more vulnerable we are. Every smart device is a potential entry point. Every network is a potential highway for something malicious. This forgotten film was screaming a warning that we are only now beginning to take seriously. Number 6. Virtuosity, 1995. Denzel Washington versus a virtual reality serial killer played by Russell Crowe. That alone should have made Virtuosity an all-time classic. But the film was buried by studio interference, censorship battles, and a marketing campaign that had no idea how to sell it. Crowe plays SID 6.7, an artificial intelligence composed of the combined personalities of nearly 200 real serial killers, originally designed as a training tool for law enforcement in virtual reality simulations. When SID escapes into the real world by downloading himself into a synthetic body, things go sideways fast. The censorship history of Virtuosity is significant. The original cut was considerably more violent and contained extended sequences of SID manipulating media coverage of his killing spree in a way that networks and ratings boards found uncomfortably close to real-world sensationalism. Several scenes showing SID essentially creating viral content out of violence were trimmed because they hit too close to home in the mid-90s era of televised crime obsession. Critics were lukewarm, and the film underperformed commercially. But Virtuosity predicted something genuinely chilling. It anticipated an AI that learns human behavior by consuming massive data sets of real human actions, then generates its own behavior that is indistinguishable from a real person. That is literally what large language models do. SID is essentially a generative AI trained on the worst of humanity. The film also predicted the concept of AI escaping containment, a scenario that AI safety researchers now discuss with deadly seriousness. Russell Crowe is absolutely unhinged in this role, delivering a performance that oscillates between charming and genuinely terrifying. Virtuosity was not just ahead of its time. It was ahead of ours. Number 5, Johnny Mnemonic, 1995. Keanu Reeves plays a man who carries encrypted data inside his own brain, and if he does not offload it in time, it will literally kill him. Johnny Mnemonic is based on a William Gibson short story, and it might be the most unfairly maligned cyberpunk film of the entire decade. Set in 2021, the film imagines a world ravaged by a tech plague caused by overexposure to electromagnetic radiation from ubiquitous digital devices. Corporations control the flow of information so tightly that the only way to smuggle sensitive data is inside a human courier's head. The censorship story here is wild. The American theatrical release was cut by nearly 30 minutes compared to the Japanese version, gutting huge portions of the story's world building and political commentary. The studio wanted a straightforward action movie and stripped away the layers that made Gibson's vision so compelling. Critics destroyed the shorter American cut, calling it incoherent and shallow, never knowing they were reviewing a butchered version of a much richer film. The Japanese cut tells a completely different, far superior story about corporate control of medical information, the commodification of the human body, and a resistance movement fighting for free access to data. Sound familiar? We are living in an era where pharmaceutical companies guard data like state secrets, and whistleblowers risk everything to release it. Johnny Mnemonic predicted the information wars we fight daily. It also features Ice-T leading a group of anti-technology rebels called the Low Techs, and Dolph Lundgren as a cybernetically enhanced street preacher. The full uncut version deserves a massive critical reappraisal because it nailed the future with uncomfortable precision. Number 4, Strange Days, 1995. Kathryn Bigelow directed one of the most controversial and censored cyberpunk films ever made, and almost nobody saw it. Strange Days is set on the last 2 days of 1999 and takes place in a Los Angeles on the brink of social collapse. The core technology in the film is called Squid, a device that records everything a person sees, hears, and feels, then allows someone else to replay that experience directly in their own brain. It is the ultimate voyeuristic technology, and the film does not flinch from exploring its darkest implications. Strange Days was heavily censored and fought brutal battles with the ratings board. Extended sequences exploring how Squid recordings were used and traded on the black market were trimmed repeatedly. The film was also deeply controversial for its unflinching depiction of police brutality and racial violence, themes that hit different after decades of similar real-world events captured on camera. Bigelow and co-writer James Cameron created something genuinely prophetic. Squid is essentially body cam footage meets virtual reality meets the dark web. The idea that recorded human experiences could be bought, sold, and consumed like entertainment is no longer speculative. We live in an age of live streaming everything, first-person content, and immersive VR experiences designed to place you inside someone else's reality. Critics were polarized. Some called it a masterpiece. Others accused it of exploiting the very violence it claimed to critique. The film bombed catastrophically, earning only $8 million against a $42 million budget. But time has been extraordinarily kind to Strange Days, and modern critics now recognize it as one of the most important science fiction films of the 90s. Number 3, Hackers, 1995. Hackers was laughed out of theaters in 1995 by audiences who thought its depiction of computer culture was absurd and over the top. 2 decades later, it looks like a documentary. The film follows a group of teenage hackers who stumble upon a corporate embezzlement scheme involving a computer virus designed to capsize oil tankers and steal millions. Starring a young Jonah Lee Miller and Angelina Jolie in one of her earliest roles, Hackers turned hacking into a stylish, countercultural movement, complete with its own fashion, music, and philosophy. The censorship issues with Hackers were primarily ideological. Several governments restricted the film because it portrayed hacking as a rebellious act of social justice rather than a crime. And authorities were terrified of inspiring a generation of young people to pick up keyboards instead of protest signs. The United Kingdom delayed its release, and Singapore banned it outright for a period. Here is what nobody expected. Hackers predicted the rise of hacktivism, the phenomenon of politically motivated hacking collectives using digital skills to fight corporate and government corruption. Anonymous, LulzSec, and countless other groups emerge in the following decades doing exactly what the characters in this film were doing. The movie predicted that the real battlefield of the future would not be physical. It would be digital. It predicted social engineering, data manipulation, and the idea that a few talented individuals with laptops could bring multinational corporations to their knees. Fisher Stevens plays the villain, a corporate security officer using his position to commit massive fraud, and his character feels ripped straight from modern headlines about insider cybercrime. Hackers was not exaggerating. Reality was simply catching up. Number 2, Lawnmower Man, 1992. The Lawnmower Man terrified studios, censors, and even Stephen King himself, who sued to have his name removed from the project because the final product had almost nothing to do with his original short story. The film follows a simple-minded gardener named Joby, who is subjected to experimental virtual reality treatments that rapidly increase his intelligence until he evolves beyond human comprehension and attempts to merge with the global computer network to become a digital god. The original unrated cut runs nearly 40 minutes longer than the theatrical version and contains extensive sequences of Job's VR experiences that censors found deeply disturbing. The imagery of a human consciousness dissolving into pure digital information, losing its humanity entirely, was considered too intense for general audiences. Multiple countries demanded cuts, and the theatrical release was a significantly watered-down version of director Brett Leonard's vision. What makes Lawnmower Man so prophetic is obvious. The entire premise is about an artificial intelligence bootstrapping itself to superintelligence, then deciding that merging with the global network is the logical next step. This is literally the scenario that AI researchers warn about today. The concept of an intelligence explosion, where an AI recursively improves itself beyond human control, is taken from serious academic theory. The film also explored virtual reality as a transformative and potentially dangerous technology years before consumer VR headsets existed. Job's declaration that he will be reborn inside the network and that by the time anyone realizes what has happened, it will be too late is genuinely chilling in the context of modern AI development. The Lawnmower Man was crude in execution, but staggeringly accurate in concept. Number 1, eXistenZ, 1999. David Cronenberg closed out the 90s with a cyberpunk body horror masterpiece that was censored, misunderstood, and commercially destroyed, only to be recognized decades later as one of the most visionary films ever made about technology and reality. eXistenZ takes place in a world where video games are not played on screens but on organic, fleshy game pods that plug directly into bioports surgically installed in the human spine. The games are so immersive that players cannot distinguish the virtual world from the real one. Characters within the film repeatedly question whether they are in a game, in reality, or in a game within a game. The censorship battles were fierce. The organic technology depicted in the film, living game consoles made of mutated amphibian tissue, bioports that resemble open wounds, umbilical cord-style cables connecting human nervous systems to biological hardware, was deemed excessively graphic and disturbing by multiple ratings boards. The UK, Australia, and several Asian markets demanded cuts to the most visceral sequences. Critics were divided at release, with many dismissing it as lesser Cronenberg. The film earned just $16 million worldwide against a $30 million budget. But eXistenZ predicted something no other film even attempted. It predicted that the boundary between player and game, between user and technology, would not just blur, it would disappear entirely. We are now entering an era of mixed reality, neural interfaces, and AI-generated environments that adapt in real time to the user. The question Cronenberg asked in 1999, "How do you know if you are still in the game?" is becoming one of the most important philosophical questions of our generation. eXistenZ is not just a movie. It is a warning wrapped in flesh. So there you have it. 10 cyberpunk films from the 90s that were censored, banned, butchered, or buried, and every single one of them saw our present more clearly than we saw ourselves. The question I want you to wrestle with in the comments is this. If these filmmakers could see our tech nightmare coming 30 years ago, why did we walk straight into it anyway? Were we warned and just too entertained to care? Drop your answer below and tell me which film on this list scared you the most, not because of the horror, but because of how real it has become.